Captain Maya Rodriguez stood in the gleaming corridors of the Galactic War Academy, wondering if she'd accidentally signed up for her own public execution. The invitation had seemed legitimate enough. Elite military minds from across the galaxy, competing in the ultimate tactical simulation for a spot in the Intergalactic Defense Corps. What they'd failed to mention was that she'd be the only human in a room full of species that considered her people barely more evolved than particularly clever bacteria. "Ah, the human has arrived," announced Commander Throck, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension usually reserved for small children who've just wet themselves. The Kraxon stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating that made him look like a walking tank had mated with a very angry rhinoceros. How quaint. Maya smiled sweetly. "Thanks, Commander. I brought my crayons and everything." The assembled crowd of alien dignitaries chuckled with the kind of polite amusement you'd show a dancing monkey. Maya counted at least 50 different species in the observation gallery, all here to watch what was apparently the galactic equivalent of a nature documentary. Today's episode, watch the primitive mammal attempt complex thought. The War Academy's final examination. Throck continued, gesturing toward a massive holographic display, is the culmination of 2 centuries of military science. The simulation will test every aspect of strategic thinking, tactical execution, and leadership capability. The victor earns immediate admission to the Defense Corps command structure. Maya nodded along, noting how Throck's pronunciation of victor somehow managed to exclude her from consideration entirely. She'd seen this before. The setup was classic: invite one human, watch them fail spectacularly, then spend the next decade using it as evidence that humans weren't ready for galactic civilization. Of course, Throck added with what passed for a smile on his reptilian features, the simulation has maintained certain standards. No species has ever won without demonstrating the fundamental qualities of advanced military thinking. Translation: no human had ever won, and they weren't about to let that streak end today. Maya examined the simulation chamber, a crystalline dome filled with enough processing power to simulate entire star systems. The technology was impressive, she had to admit. Probably cost more than Earth's entire military budget. The aliens had clearly put a lot of effort into making sure their little war game was as intimidating as possible. "The parameters are quite comprehensive," continued Admiral Vextar, a tall, pale creature whose species apparently communicated through a combination of clicks and what sounded like someone gargling with gravel. "Multi-dimensional battlefields, resource management, fleet coordination, and adaptive threat response. All monitored by our most advanced assessment protocols." Maya raised her hand. "Quick question. When you say assessment protocols, do you mean the kind that are completely objective and fair, or the kind that are designed to make sure the human loses in the most entertaining way possible?" The silence that followed was so profound you could have heard a pin drop in another solar system. Finally, Throck's laugh echoed through the chamber like a landslide in armor. "Captain Rodriguez," he said, "I can assure you that the Academy's standards are beyond reproach. If humanity is truly ready to join the galactic community as equals, then surely one of your finest military minds should have no difficulty with a simple war game." Simple. Right. Maya had read the preliminary specs. The simulation would throw everything from asteroid field navigation to multi-species diplomatic crises at the contestants. It was designed to test abilities that some species had evolved over millions of years. And here she was, representing a species that had only figured out space travel a few decades ago and still couldn't agree on what constituted a proper pizza topping. But as Maya looked around at the expectant faces in the gallery, she felt something familiar stirring in her chest. It was the same feeling she'd had when her instructors said women couldn't handle combat roles. The same feeling when the brass said humans were too aggressive for space diplomacy. The same feeling she got every time someone told her what humans couldn't do. "Well then," Maya said, cracking her knuckles, "this should be fun." The other contestants made Maya feel like she'd brought a butter knife to a nuclear war. First up was General Thrak 9, who somehow managed to make Commander Thrak look like a peaceful diplomat. The Kraxon warrior's idea of a handshake nearly crushed Maya's fingers, and his smile revealed teeth that could probably bite through starship hull plating. Human warrior, Thrak 9 rumbled. I look forward to our battle. Your species' reputation for creativity precedes you. Maya massaged her hand. Thanks. Your species' reputation for subtlety precedes you too. Next came Node Prime, and Maya had to resist the urge to ask if someone had forgotten to plug it in. The synthetic collective's representative was a sleek humanoid form made of what looked like liquid mercury and bad intentions. When it spoke, its voice sounded like a computer that had achieved consciousness and was deeply disappointed about it. Greetings, human. I have calculated 47,832 possible strategic combinations for this simulation. You will encounter 23,719 scenarios where immediate surrender would be your optimal choice. Wow, Maya said. Did you calculate the scenario where I tell you to shove your statistics up your exhaust port? Node Prime's head tilted with mechanical precision. That eventuality was not included in my projections. Rookie mistake. The final contestant made Maya's skin crawl in ways she couldn't quite explain. Psychic Overlord Zephyria looked human enough, if humans came in shades of blue-green and had eyes that seemed to stare directly into your soul's browser history. The Vorthak hive mind representative smiled, and Maya felt a gentle prodding at the edges of her thoughts. Such interesting mental patterns, Zephyria said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking to multiple minds simultaneously. Most species think in orderly sequences. Your thoughts are like jazz music played by caffeinated squirrels. That's the nicest thing anyone said about my brain in years. Commander Thrak called them to attention, clearly relishing his role as master of ceremonies. Contestants, the simulation parameters are as follows. You will each command a mixed fleet across multiple theaters of operation. Victory conditions include territorial control, resource acquisition, enemy fleet elimination, and strategic objective completion. The simulation adapts in real time, generating new challenges based on your tactical decisions. Maya raised her hand again, and the scoring system, weighted across multiple factors, Admiral Vextar responded. Combat effectiveness, resource efficiency, strategic innovation, and command capability. Each factor is calibrated to established galactic military standards. There it was. Maya had seen enough rigged games to recognize the setup. Combat effectiveness favored the Kraxons, who had been bred for warfare. Resource efficiency played to the synthetics' computational advantages. Strategic innovation belonged to species that had been playing these games for centuries. And command capability was measured against standards that assumed you could either read minds or calculate every possible outcome. It was like judging a swimming competition where 3 contestants were dolphins and one was a really enthusiastic hamster. The simulation has been running for 200 years, Thrak continued with obvious pride. In that time, we have seen victories from 17 different species, each demonstrating the unique advantages of their evolutionary heritage. How many humans have won? Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. None, Node Prime supplied helpfully. Human participants have achieved an average performance rating of 23.7% across all metrics. The highest individual score was 31%, achieved by Captain Sarah Johnson in 2387. Maya made a mental note to look up Captain Johnson later. Anyone who'd managed even 31% against these odds deserved a drink bought for them. Of course, as Zephyria added with synthetic sympathy, humans face certain limitations: single-threaded consciousness, limited computational capacity, inability to perceive quantum probability matrices. It's hardly surprising that your species struggles with advanced military concepts. Right, Maya said. We're also terrible at breathing underwater and flying under our own power. Weird how we keep surviving anyway. The observation gallery buzzed with what might have been laughter or possibly the sound of several species placing bets. Maya suspected the odds weren't in her favor. Throck gestured toward 4 crystalline pods arranged around the central simulation core. Contestants will interface directly with their command systems. The simulation will begin with basic fleet positioning and escalate according to each participant's tactical choices. Estimated duration, 6 to 8 hours. Maya looked at her pod, then at her opponents. Thrak 9 was flexing muscles that could probably bench press a small asteroid. Node Prime had begun generating holographic displays showing fleet formations that looked like three-dimensional chess played by mathematical geniuses. Zephyria's eyes had gone completely white, suggesting she was already coordinating with the collective consciousness of her entire species. And here was Maya, whose greatest military achievement to date was winning a bar fight against 3 drunk Martian colonists. "Any questions before we begin?" Throck asked. Maya raised her hand one more time. "Yeah. Do you guys have a gift shop? I want to buy a t-shirt that says I got my ass kicked by aliens and all I got was this lousy t-shirt." The gallery erupted in what was definitely laughter this time. "Very well," Throck said. "Contestants, take your positions. Let the final examination begin." As Maya climbed into her pod, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to star in the galaxy's most expensive comedy show. The simulation came online like someone had plugged Maya's brain into the universe's most elaborate video game. Suddenly she was standing on the bridge of a command dreadnought, surrounded by holographic displays showing star maps, fleet positions, and enough tactical data to make a statistician weep with joy. Her fleet materialized around her flagship, 50 ships ranging from nimble fighters to massive carriers, each one a perfect digital recreation of actual military hardware. Maya had to admit, the attention to detail was impressive. You could practically smell the recycled air and feel the artificial gravity. The battlefield spread across 3 distinct theaters, a dense asteroid field perfect for ambush tactics, an open space sector ideal for large fleet engagements, and a planetary system with multiple colonized worlds that needed protecting. Resources flowed in measured quantities, forcing difficult choices about where to focus limited shipbuilding capacity. "Simulation commencing," announced the system's neutral voice. "All contestants begin with identical starting conditions. Victory parameters are now active." Maya watched her opponent's opening moves with professional interest. Thrak 9 immediately began massing his fleet for a direct assault on the central objectives, because apparently the Kraxon approach to strategy was hit it harder until it stops moving. His ships formed up in classic battle formations that looked impressive and probably worked great against enemies polite enough to stand still and wait to be shot. Node Prime's fleet dispersed with mathematical precision, each ship moving to optimal positions calculated for maximum efficiency. The synthetic's resource allocation was flawless, with construction queues optimized to produce exactly the right mix of ships for each anticipated scenario. It was like watching a chess grandmaster play against kindergartners. Zephyria's fleet moved like a single organism, which Maya supposed it basically was. Her ships coordinated without any visible communication delay, executing complex maneuvers that required perfect timing. The Vortak could literally share thoughts across their entire force, making them immune to confusion, miscommunication, or the 1,000 little errors that usually plagued military operations. And then there was Maya's fleet, which was currently doing its best impression of a group of tourists who'd gotten separated from their guide. She'd started by splitting her forces seemingly at random, sending small groups to scout areas that didn't appear particularly strategic. Her resource allocation looked like someone had closed their eyes and pointed at random items on a menu. While her opponents built focused fleets designed for specific purposes, Maya seemed to be collecting ships the way some people collected coffee mugs. Fascinating, she heard Admiral Vextar comment from the observation deck. "The human appears to be, what's the term? Winging it? No." The gallery's laughter was audible even through the simulation interface. Maya smiled and continued making moves that probably looked like the military equivalent of finger painting. Her first major engagement came when one of Thrak 9's assault groups encountered her scouts near the asteroid field. The Kraxon ships immediately opened fire, expecting to crush the smaller human force through superior firepower. Maya's ships scattered like startled birds, fleeing deeper into the asteroid field with what looked like complete panic. Thrak 9's forces pursued, confident in their technological superiority and tactical doctrine. Standard human response, Thrak observed with satisfaction. Flight rather than fight. Predictable. What wasn't predictable was the way Maya's fleeing ships somehow managed to lead their pursuers through increasingly dangerous asteroid clusters. Using their smaller size and apparently random movements to avoid collision, while the larger Kraxon ships found themselves navigating an obstacle course designed by someone with a grudge against large spacecraft. By the time Thrak 9 realized his mistake, he'd lost 3 ships to asteroid impacts and found his remaining forces scattered across a field where their numerical advantage meant nothing. Maya's scouts regrouped and began picking off isolated vessels with hit and run attacks that were either brilliant tactical thinking or incredible luck. Interesting, Node Prime commented, though its voice betrayed no emotion. The humans' chaotic movement patterns appear to have defensive applications. Meanwhile, Maya was having similar lucky encounters with her other opponents. Her seemingly inefficient resource allocation resulted in a diverse mix of ships that could respond to multiple threat types, while her opponent's specialized fleets found themselves optimized for battles that Maya refused to fight. When Node Prime sent a perfectly calculated strike force to capture a key resource node, but they found Maya's mismatched defenders waiting with exactly the wrong ships for a conventional engagement and exactly the right ships for the weird fight that actually developed. Her heavy fighters couldn't match the synthetics cruisers in direct combat, but they could harass supply lines and force the enemy into extended engagements that stretched their resources thin. Zephyria's psychic coordination worked perfectly against predictable opponents, but Maya's forces kept doing things that made no sense from a strategic perspective. When the Vorthak tried to read her tactical intentions, they found something that felt like trying to follow a conversation between multiple people with ADHD who'd all been given different topics to discuss. 3 hours into the simulation, the score displays showed Maya trailing badly in every conventional metric. She held the least territory, controlled the fewest resources, and had lost more ships than any other contestant. The observation gallery had settled into the comfortable rhythm of watching a predictable slaughter. But something odd was happening in the details. Maya's losses were concentrated among her least capable ships, almost like she was using them as expendable scouts. Her territorial holdings were scattered but strategically positioned to disrupt supply lines. Her resource production was low, but her expenditures were even lower, suggesting she was stockpiling something. The human's performance remains consistent with historical data, Thrak announced to the gallery. While her tactical creativity shows some promise, she lacks the fundamental capabilities necessary for advanced strategic thinking. Maya, busy orchestrating what looked like organized chaos, allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes the best way to win a rigged game was to make everyone think you were losing until the very moment you weren't. 4 hours into the simulation, Maya's strategy shifted from apparent incompetence to weaponized chaos, though to the observers it probably looked like the same thing. The beauty of human unpredictability, she'd learned over years of fighting people smarter and stronger than herself, was that it looked like stupidity right up until the moment it didn't. Take her current engagement with Node Prime's main fleet. The synthetic had calculated the perfect intercept course for Maya's scattered forces, positioning its ships to create an inescapable kill box. Every variable had been accounted for: Maya's ship capabilities, her probable retreat routes, even the gravitational effects of nearby planets. What Node Prime hadn't calculated was Maya's decision to ram one of her expendable freighters into an asteroid at precisely the right angle to create a debris field that would arrive at the battle site exactly when the synthetics' formations were most vulnerable to disruption. That maneuver is tactically unsound. Node Prime transmitted as its perfect formation dissolved into chaos. You have sacrificed valuable resources for minimal strategic gain. Yeah, well, Maya replied, watching her remaining ships slip through the gaps in the now disrupted enemy formation. My species invented the concept of worth it. You should add it to your calculations. The real masterpiece was what she was doing to Thrak 9. The Kraxon general had fallen into the classic trap of thinking that because his species was naturally suited for warfare, he understood war itself. Maya had been feeding his ego with small victories, letting him push her forces back while she studied his patterns. Kraxons, it turned out, were incredibly predictable once you understood their psychology. They valued honor above tactics, direct confrontation over subterfuge, and personal glory over strategic objectives. Maya had started broadcasting fake distress signals from fleeing human ships, knowing that Thrak 9 couldn't resist pursuing what looked like easy victories. Each pursuit led his forces further from their strategic objectives and deeper into situations where Maya's supposedly inferior fleet could engage on terms that favored speed and flexibility over brute force. The Kraxon ships were individually superior, but they fought like individual warriors rather than coordinated units. You fight without honor. Thrak 9 roared over the communications channel as another of his squadrons found themselves ambushed in an asteroid field. I fight to win, Maya replied. Honor's great and all, but it doesn't help much when you're dead. But the real psychological warfare was what she was doing to Zephyria. The Vorthak's telepathic coordination was their greatest strength and, as Maya had discovered, their greatest weakness. Psychic species were used to orderly minds that thought in logical progressions. Maya had spent the last hour deliberately thinking about everything except her actual strategy. Every time Zephyria tried to read her tactical intentions, Maya flooded her mind with random memories, her grandmother's cookie recipe, the lyrics to ancient Earth songs, but detailed recollections of every terrible movie she'd ever watched. She thought about tax forms and dental appointments, and that weird dream she'd had about being chased by sentient breakfast foods. Your mental discipline is chaotic, Zephyria said, her usual composure showing cracks. How do you coordinate your forces without clear strategic visualization? Practice, Maya said, while simultaneously thinking about what would happen if cats could drive spaceships. Humans spent millions of years learning to work together despite having completely insane thought processes. It's kind of our thing. The effort was clearly straining Zephyria's psychic abilities. The Vorthak had never encountered a mind that could function tactically while consciously thinking about completely unrelated topics. Her fleet's coordination began suffering as she struggled to filter Maya's mental chaos from her own strategic planning. Meanwhile, Maya's scattered forces were converging on objectives her opponents had left undefended while they chased what looked like easy targets. Her resource production, seemingly inefficient for 4 hours, suddenly revealed itself as a carefully planned stockpiling operation. She'd been building exactly the ships she needed for the endgame, disguising her intentions behind apparent tactical incompetence. The simulation's adaptive AI began throwing new challenges at the contestants: supply shortages, equipment failures, civilian evacuation scenarios. These were designed to test flexibility and decision-making under pressure, areas where the alien species' specialized advantages should have given them clear superiority. Instead, Maya's human adaptability proved perfectly suited for dealing with problems that didn't fit standard tactical models. When Node Prime's optimal strategies failed due to unexpected variables, the synthetic struggled to recalculate fast enough. When Thrak 9's honor-bound responses proved inappropriate for civilian protection scenarios, his performance suffered. When Zephyria's hive-mind coordination became liability during rapid response situations, her forces lost cohesion. Maya, on the other hand, had grown up in a species that treated everything going wrong simultaneously as a Tuesday afternoon. Her forces adapted to new challenges with the casual flexibility of people who'd learned to expect that any plan would need to be completely rewritten at least 3 times before the implementation. The human's performance metrics are anomalous, Admiral Vextar observed, studying the real-time analysis displays. Her conventional scores remain poor, but her adaptive response index is off the charts. Irrelevant, Throck replied, though he sounded less confident than before. Military effectiveness requires consistency, not chaos. Maya grinned as she launched the next phase of her plan. Sometimes consistency was exactly what you needed to overcome, especially when your opponents had built their entire strategic approach around being consistently superior in predictable ways. The beauty of chaos wasn't that it was random. The beauty of chaos was that it looked random while serving carefully planned purposes that nobody else could see until it was too late to stop them. Hour 6 of the simulation was when Maya stopped pretending to lose and started actually winning, though the transition was so subtle that most observers missed it until the final scores started updating. Her master plan revealed itself like a flower blooming in reverse, each seemingly chaotic decision suddenly showing its place in a larger pattern that her opponents had been too focused on their own strengths to notice. While they'd been playing the game as designed, Maya had been redesigning the game itself. The first domino fell when Thrak 9's honor-driven pursuit of fleeing human ships led his main battle group directly into a carefully orchestrated trap. Maya had spent hours seeding the area with her expendable vessels, each one equipped with just enough firepower to pose a threat but positioned to look like easy targets. "Come on, big guy," Maya muttered, watching Thrak 9's forces spread out to engage what looked like scattered survivors. Just a little further. The Kraxon general took the bait beautifully, dividing his superior forces to pursue multiple easy victories. His ships found themselves engaged in a dozen small battles across a wide area, each one preventing them from supporting the others. Maya's forces had been built for exactly this scenario, small, fast, and capable of punching above their weight in short engagements. "This is not honorable combat," Thrak 9 roared as his scattered forces found themselves being systematically eliminated by opponents who refused to stand still and fight fairly. "No," Maya agreed cheerfully, "but it is effective combat." Node Prime's downfall was more elegant. The synthetic had built its strategy around perfect information and optimal calculations, but Maya had been feeding it false data for hours. Every random movement, every wasteful resource allocation, every tactical error had been carefully designed to fit patterns that would lead Node Prime to incorrect conclusions. When the synthetic finally realized that Maya's apparent chaos masked a deeper strategy, it tried to recalculate based on new assumptions. But by then Maya had moved beyond the parameters Node Prime could model. Her forces were operating on principles that required intuition and adaptive thinking, concepts that didn't translate well into algorithmic predictions. "Your tactical approach defies logical analysis," Node Prime transmitted, its usually confident voice betraying something that might have been frustration. "Logic's great," Maya replied, "but sometimes you need to know when to ignore it." Node Prime's perfectly optimized fleet found itself outmaneuvered by forces that made decisions too quickly for computational analysis to counter. Maya's commanders operated on instinct and experience, adapting faster than any calculation could predict. But the coup de grace was what happened to Zephyria. The Vorthak's psychic coordination had become a liability as Maya's mental chaos propagated through the telepathic network. Every time Zephyria tried to coordinate her forces, she had to process Maya's deliberately scattered thoughts, creating delays and confusion that accumulated across the entire fleet. "Your mind is infectious," Zephyria said, her perfect mental discipline showing signs of strain. "How do you maintain tactical coherence while thinking about, what was that? Penguins wearing tiny hats?" "Compartmentalization," Maya explained while visualizing an army of formal-wear-clad Arctic birds. "Humans learn to keep multiple thought processes running simultaneously. We can plan a battle while wondering what's for lunch and remembering song lyrics from 3 centuries ago." The effect was devastating. Zephyria's hive mind advantage collapsed as her own thoughts became contaminated with Maya's chaotic mental patterns. Her fleet's coordination dissolved into the kind of confused mess that humans considered normal operating conditions. As the simulation entered its final phase, Maya's true position became clear. While her opponents had been fighting each other for control of obvious strategic objectives, Maya had been capturing the resources and positions that actually mattered for victory. Her seemingly inferior territorial holdings suddenly revealed themselves as a network of mutually supporting positions that controlled key supply routes and resource flows. Her inefficient ship designs proved perfectly adapted for the endgame scenarios the simulation generated. While her opponents found their specialized fleets struggling with unexpected challenges, Maya's diverse forces handled each new crisis with the casual competence of people who expected everything to go wrong. The final score tally was brutal in its simplicity. Territorial control, Maya's scattered holdings suddenly counted for more than her opponent's concentrated territories. Resource efficiency, her apparent waste had been careful stockpiling for maximum endgame impact. Combat effectiveness, quality trumped quantity when the quality was specifically designed to counter each opponent's strengths. Strategic innovation, apparently, nobody had ever tried winning through organized chaos before. "This is unprecedented," Admiral Vextar announced, his voice carrying the tone of someone whose entire worldview had just been gently detonated. The final rankings appeared on the main display. First place, Captain Maya Rodriguez, Human Defense Force. Second place, a three-way tie between contestants who had spent so much effort countering each other that they'd forgotten to actually win. The observation gallery fell silent except for the sound of several species having their assumptions about human intelligence quietly explode. "Well," Maya said, climbing out of her simulation pod with a satisfied stretch, "that was fun. When do I start my new job?" Commander Throck stared at the displays as if he could make them change through sheer force of will. There must be some error in the scoring system. "No error," the simulation AI announced with mechanical certainty. All parameters were met according to established protocols. The human contestant achieved victory through tactics that exploited systematic weaknesses in her opponent's strategic approaches. Maya grinned at the assembled aliens. "Turns out your perfect war game had one tiny flaw. It assumed everyone would play by the rules you designed for perfect players." She walked over to the victory podium and picked up the ceremonial flag that marked her admission to the Intergalactic Defense Corps. "Thanks for the game, everyone. Same time next week." The aftermath of Maya's victory played out like a nature documentary where the gazelle had suddenly turned around and eaten the lions. The observation gallery buzzed with the kind of confused chatter you'd expect from people whose fundamental understanding of reality had just been gently mugged. "How?" Commander Throck demanded, his armor plates rattling with indignation. The simulation parameters were designed by the finest military minds in the galaxy. Every variable was accounted for, every advantage properly weighted. Maya hefted the victory flag, enjoying the weight of it. "That's exactly the problem, Commander. You designed the perfect test for perfect strategic thinking. Unfortunately for you, humans aren't perfect. We're just really, really good at being imperfect in ways that work." Admiral Vextar was studying the tactical playback displays with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle made of smoke and wishful thinking. "Your strategies violated fundamental principles of military science. Dividing forces against superior numbers, inefficient resource allocation, unpredictable movement patterns." "All terrible ideas," Maya agreed cheerfully. "Right up until they weren't. See, that's the thing about humans. We spent millions of years getting eaten by things bigger, faster, and stronger than us. We learned to survive by being the kind of prey that predators couldn't predict." Node Prime approached with mechanical precision, its calculations clearly struggling to process what had happened. "Your tactical approach defied logical modeling. How do you coordinate strategy without optimal decision trees?" "Easy. We don't." Maya shrugged. Human military doctrine is based on the assumption that everything will go wrong, all plans are temporary, and the enemy is probably smarter than you are. So we build flexibility into everything and train our people to think for themselves when the plan inevitably falls apart. The assembled alien dignitaries looked like they were witnessing a fundamental law of physics being casually violated. Several were taking notes, though Maya suspected they were the kind of notes that started with "How is this even possible?" Psychic overlord Zephyria was still massaging her temples, her perfect psychic discipline showing signs of a species-wide headache. Your mental patterns are chaotic. How do you achieve strategic coherence with such disorganized thinking? Practice, Maya said. Humans have been working together despite being individually insane for thousands of years. It's called civilization, and it's basically organized chaos with better architecture. General Thrak 9 approached with the kind of respectful posture that warriors showed to opponents who'd beaten them fairly. Despite his species' reputation for aggression, Maya had to respect that. Human warrior, your tactics were unconventional, but effective. How do you train for battles that have no precedent? By assuming every battle will be different from the last one, Maya replied. Humans don't fight the same war twice if we can help it. We adapt faster than our enemies can plan for us. Commander Thrak was still staring at the final scores as if he could will them to change. The simulation has run for 200 years without a human victory. How do you explain this anomaly? Maya looked around at the assembled aliens, each one representing a species that had evolved specific advantages that made them naturally superior at warfare. Bigger, stronger, smarter, more coordinated, more logical. Perfect killing machines, every one of them. You want to know why humans never won before? She asked. Because you designed the test to measure the wrong things. You tested for optimal performance under ideal conditions. But real wars aren't fought under ideal conditions by optimal performers. They're fought by whoever's left standing when everything goes to hell. She gestured to the tactical displays still showing the simulation playback. Every one of you is better at war than humans are. But you're all better at specific kinds of war. Thrak 9 excels at direct confrontation between honorable opponents. Node Prime dominates scenarios where perfect information leads to optimal outcomes. Zephyria's coordination abilities are unmatched. When dealing with predictable tactical situations, the gallery was listening with the kind of attention usually reserved for last words or lottery numbers. But real wars aren't honorable, or optimal, or predictable, Maya continued. They're messy, confusing disasters where half your equipment doesn't work, your intelligence is wrong, and the enemy is doing something nobody planned for. That's where humans excel. We're not the best at any one thing, but we're pretty good at dealing with everything going wrong simultaneously. Admiral Vex Tar made a sound that might have been understanding or possibly indigestion. You're suggesting that human unpredictability is actually a tactical advantage? I'm suggesting that every galactic war for the past 1,000 years has been won by whoever adapted fastest to changing conditions, Maya replied. And humans have been adapting to impossible situations since we figured out how to throw rocks at predators that could eat us for breakfast. She looked around at the assembled military minds, each one representing species that had achieved dominance through specific evolutionary advantages. You've all been preparing to fight theoretical wars against theoretical enemies using theoretical optimal strategies. Meanwhile, humans have been preparing to fight real wars against real enemies who will try real hard to kill us in ways we haven't thought of yet. The flag felt good in her hands, solid and real, in a way that perfect strategies never were. So thanks for the victory, Maya said with a grin that probably looked insufficiently respectful for someone addressing the galactic military elite. I'm looking forward to teaching you all how to think outside your perfect little tactical boxes. First lesson starts Monday, why the best plan is the one you can change when it stops working. As she walked toward the exit, Maya could hear the confused murmur of species that had just discovered their fundamental assumptions about warfare might need some revision. Behind her, The victory flag fluttered with what she chose to interpret as optimistic defiance. Humans, still surprisingly difficult to exterminate, even when the game was rigged against them. Sometimes, especially then,